Hello, everyone, and welcome to this exciting moment, the last lecture in our ISTQB test management journey. I'm super glad you have made it to the very end. So, well done, everyone. You're really the best. Now, let's get directly into today's topic because it's indeed the longest lecture in this syllabus and a very important one at the same time. Today, we're going to talk about something that many of our people, testers and test managers, feel deep in their bones but often struggle to explain. That's the cost-benefit relationship of testing. Yes, there will be a little math later, and you may need a calculator and a bit of deep analysis, but take it from me, you're gonna love what's in this lecture. The real goal of today's session is to understand how we as test managers can connect the dots between the efforts we put into testing and the actual value it brings to the organization. Because let's be realistic, if we just say testing is important, a lot of stakeholders won't just care. They will politely nod their heads and move on. But if we said something like, testing saved us $6,100 per defect, well, now suddenly you have their full attention and full support. So how can we do this? And what's the deal with the $6,100? Let's find out. All right, let's kick off things by admitting a truth. Most organizations agree that testing is valuable. They know it's something important for the quality. But the moment you ask, okay, but how valuable? Show me numbers. Things get awkward really fast. Even test managers sometimes struggle to articulate that. We know it matters, but we don't always frame it in a way that business leaders can understand. But why do we struggle to structure a response to such a question? Well, it's kinda embarrassing to say, but the test people are always focusing on daily operational tasks. Like writing and executing test cases, logging defects, retesting fixes, etc. And don't get me wrong here, those are critical things. No one can deny that. But if all we talk about is how many defects we logged this week, we're probably missing the big picture. For example, the CFO or the Chief Financial Officer doesn't care about defect number 257. They care about whether testing is protecting revenue, saving costs, and reducing risks. Similarly, leaders in our organizations are interested in how testing connects to business outcomes. So they want to know if testing will help avoid a costly broken release, and if testing is going to reduce legal exposure and protect the company's reputation. That's the language they understand. And that's exactly why learning to speak in cost-benefit terms is very powerful. You see, when you can justify budgets by showing the savings from early defect detection, and when you can influence release decisions with solid risk data, suddenly you're not just the test manager. You're a strategic partner in decision making. And that's where you want to be. All right. Now, I believe it's very obvious that the benefit of testing must be surfaced and presented to your stakeholders. And there are basically two ways to do this. We can start with the qualitative side. These are the benefits that don't always have a price tag, but you can easily feel them everywhere. For example, your organization's reputation for quality improves when your releases are stable. Customers trust you more, which means they stick around for longer. And these qualitative benefits are not just limited to the enterprise side, but they extend to the very core of your team and processes. Just think about predictable releases. You don't have a chaotic rollouts, you don't have teams panicking at midnight, and morals are always skyrocketing. Plus, stakeholders gain confidence in the process, legal risks go down, and most importantly, the chance of catastrophic failures is dramatically reduced. You know, those things that could cost millions or even risk human lives, especially if your software is dealing with critical domains like healthcare, aviation, or autonomous driving cars. Yes, you might not see all of that in a financial spreadsheet, and they are very difficult to assess or evaluate in the first place. But believe me, everyone knows the value here. Now, for the other side of the equation, where we find the quantitative benefits. And those are the numbers you can present with confidence. For instance, defects found before release, defects prevented entirely, or even defects left unfixed but safely documented. You know, the hard data that we are all good at. Now, using quantitative data is super cool. So, for example, you can show how much money you've saved by detecting defects early in the software development lifecycle. Or you can even back yourself and your process up with strong evidence by showing things like Bohm's curve, which we're going to discuss today. Also, these data show up in risk reduction through testing, plus transparent reporting on project and product status. Suddenly, you've got a very measurable story to tell. And believe me, managers love measurable stories. Excellent, everyone. Let's now see how testing can support the process of decision making across the entire organization. As a starter, testing can easily arm decision makers with the right information. So, whether you're dealing with a product owner, a project manager, or a release lead, you can always provide them with very clear evidence about whether the product is ready to go live or not. That's why testing takes decision making out of the realm of guesswork. Now, the beauty of testing is that it provides all kinds of metrics that allow stakeholders to deal with mind-twisting scenarios. For example, sometimes it's actually smarter to go live with some known defects. Sounds strange, right? That's true, but think about it. If these defects are minor, the likelihood is low, or there is a simple workaround. And if the market opportunity is right there in front of you, it may cost more to delay than to ship with these little bugs. So you can see how testing helps the entire board make that call with confidence instead of rolling the dice. But of course, such decisions are tied to something called defect tolerance, which basically means to what extent we can ship a product with some residual defects. And this tolerance is based on two well-known levers: how likely the defect is to occur and how severe the impact would be. Of course, it depends on the context, but generally speaking, if it's both likely and severe, no way you can ship. But if it's rare and trivial, well, you can live with that for a while. What I want to say here, the ultimate goal isn't perfection, it's balance. Balancing quality, time to market, and business needs. That's why everyone, including those stakeholders who are always underestimating testing, doesn't dare to make major decisions without peeking into the test results and metrics. They know testing shines a light so that balance is achieved consciously, not by accident. Now, I hope you are properly caffeinated, because here's where we roll up our sleeves and bring in a formula. So we're going to talk about something called average saving per defect, plus you get to see the cost of quality that we've mentioned before, but in action. Now, before we move on, and in order to understand the whole idea of this, you should recall what preventive appraisal, internal and external failure costs are all about. We have discussed them in detail in the previous lecture, but as a refresher, prevention costs are the money you spend to stop defects from being created in the first place using activities like developer training, requirements reviews, and design inspections. The appraisal costs are the money you spend to find defects that already exist in the work product before it goes live. This is where static and dynamic testing live. Internal failure costs are all about addressing defects found by testing before product release, and the external ones are the costs relative to defects found but after the product has been released. They are extremely expensive, of course. So, after this quick flashback, let's start with the average cost saved per defect. The importance of such a quantitative metric is that it tells everyone how much money we save every time a defect is caught before release. The formula for this one is super simple. It's basically external failure cost minus what would have cost us to catch and fix that defect earlier. Think of it as your savings coupon for each bug found. Next, let's encounter the bigger equation, the total cost of quality. So this one adds up all the money spent preventing, detecting, and fixing defects, plus the money lost when defects still slip into production. It's the full price tag of quality for that release. Now, I can hear someone saying, "That's great, a bunch of formulas, now what?" Well, I totally agree with you. I believe we should dive deep into those two metrics and see some examples, and maybe make a mini analysis on how to use them in real life. But before that, I feel we should take a small break because this lecture is already super long, and the remaining part is not short either. So why not pause for a few minutes, recharge with a big Stanley of coffee, and then come back fresh to see some good stuff. See you in a bit.